Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today we're taking a look at D&D horror stories. This is one that I've wanted to cover for a long time but never had the opportunity to, so oh boy am I excited. This one's brought to us by Funnel Chairman. Title of the story is I Think I Messed Up. So I recently started a 5e campaign with some longtime friends. Now, to preface this, we all have some dark and often denigrating senses of humor. This is a Spelljammer campaign that I had done a metric ton of research for in order to let my players jump between multiple campaign settings they had read about in the past. I planned the campaign as a treasure hunt in space, where another crew of Spelljammers would be racing them towards the treasure. So, here is where I messed up. One of our players is a conspiracy theory junkie. I made a one-off joke about there being a bank at one of the Astral Sea locations they visited. When they asked the name of the bank, I said it was a Rothschild & Sons. Now, mostly, this was just to get the conspiracy bro worked up. However, they decided to rob it instead of just letting go. Now, 9 sessions later, they're caught up in the middle of a 3-way war between the Elven Imperial Navy, a resurgent Goblinoid Empire, and the Rothschild Bank that had been forced to make more and more insane efforts to make them pay for robbing the bank after they shenanigans their way out of everything. I kind of want to let the bank disappear, but they love them as a bad guy. I've described them as being a force that was originally started with the best intentions, bringing law and order as well as jobs and trade to remote wild space locations, but had slowly gotten corrupted by their power and influence to the point where they are now a tyrannical and degenerate force in the multiverse. I would have just swept them under the rug as a one-off joke at the expense of my conspiracy bro player, but the players love it. They constantly praise my morally gray universe where there are no easily defined good guys and how I worked with what we thought was a joke into a relatable villain. I feel ridiculous with it, but don't know how to detach them from the story at this point, especially after a character decided he liked them so much as a villain, he worked them into his backstory. What do I do? Should I just keep this one-off joke around as a villain? Buddy, you're doing fine. It's at the end of the day, even if it's not what you intended, your players are having fun, and that is the most important part. Like, yes, you might have a story that you want to tell, but if your players are having fun and complimenting what you're doing, then keep it up. Find a way to naturally have them exit the story so you can have your own plot point build back up, but don't be afraid to let your players have that kind of fun, because if they're all enjoying it, then you're doing your job as a DM. This one's brought to us by Gazerack, and their story is titled, I Accidentally Ruined the Campaign. I'll be the judge of that. And this is from the perspective of a player. So, trying to make this as succinct as possible. Joined a sandbox campaign at level 7 that started at level 1. Made it to level 14. Rough time I played in the campaign. 2 years, 8 players, with alternating DMs. First ever campaign playing a half-orc battle master, 10, assassin, 4, and barbarian, 1. Alright, it's one hell of a multi-class. Not really have any idea how to RP, so just try to be funny, i.e. jumping out of windows when I'm caught sneaking and then just tank the fall damage like a Looney Tool. I think you meant Looney Tune. I prefer the Looney Tool though. That's on purpose, that's great. Now, get mind controlled by an aboleth, and I have to come up with a deep personal dream for the aboleth to tempt me, around level 10 at the time. I'm just gonna be honest, one of my biggest fears with this subreddit is I'm gonna find out that I've been pronouncing these names wrong in my D&D sessions for the last 4 years. Anyways, deep dive orc lore between game sessions. Come up with a goal of building a homeland for orcs. Way later at level 13, we get a year of downtime. I build a village, a fort, and gather half-orcs and orcs to live there. Even got one of the party's wizards to put their new tower in my village. Things are going great. After the downtime, we hit level 14 and go deal with the Rikshasa that had infiltrated a royal court. The whole time the king is calling my new town a shithole and just generally being an ass to me specifically. After saving his kingdom and the sun from the devil, I ask for a formal apology instead of payment. The king then gives me a gold bar with what he said was an apology inscribed on it in Elvish. Get back to the base and ask the elf pirate queen, a swashbuckler eldritch knight sorcerer, in the party to translate the inscription. It tells me to fuck myself. I return to the king by myself and kill the king and all of his male relatives, taking his kingdom from my people. Party freaks out and campaign ends because they say I'm now the villain. No one in the party was good aligned, we were all some kind of neutral except the paladin warlock who was lawful evil at the time due to backstory issues. We had burned cities together, slayed lesser gods hand in hand, we were a bane to the Yuan-ti and the Githyanki alike. Demons feared us, and yet what broke us apart? One king with a problem with orcs. I still play the same table with the same people, but I think about this at least once a month. This was the closest we got to level 20 and I ruined it. I don't think you did. All right, and here's why. 1. DM makes King extremely racist. DM refuses to make King apologize. DM gives you a literal letter with an insult written on it. DM tells the one person who could translate it what the insult is. DM is then dumbfounded that you would react that way. You know, the way that your character would react to it. That's not on you, that's on the DM. If the king was an essential character, then just don't have him insult the player character. That's all the DM had to do. You didn't want to put the king in the line of fire, don't make him a target for your players. I mean, bro has obviously not dealt with a party of murder hobos, good god. This one's brought to us by AwareVirus 7650. DM says that we aren't dedicated enough. And as the title suggests, this is a story from a player. So this story is about a year old now, but I do wonder sometimes about it in the am I the asshole way. I try to be conscious about mental health, and I wonder if I was in the wrong here. It's a long story spanning over nearly 3 years, but I'll try to make it as concise as possible. For some context, I joined this D&D group during COVID lockdown and I absolutely fell in love with it. We played online every Sunday for about 4 to 5 hours, and I had no idea when I joined, but found out later we were actually live streaming the game on Twitch. This becomes important later. Our party consisted of the DM, we'll call him X, and 7 players. The actual details of the party don't matter much to the story. As we started playing, when no one had anything to prioritize on weekends, our schedule was pretty consistent. We had a lot of free time and started spending time together outside of D&D sessions, sharing interests in other hobbies, or just staying up super late on Discord chatting. Through this game, I developed some really close relationships, and most of them are my best friends to this day, after playing with them for about 4 years now. It was kind of a golden era and one of the reasons I actually enjoyed lockdown. But the problem started when lockdown was lifted and everyone started to go back to work or see other friends. X, our DM, had been really unhappy working a typical 9-to-5 job, so he ended up starting his own DMing business and running games for people online, so most of his life was very D&D focused. He never asked us to play with him because we were friends and at the time, were helping him build up his portfolio. I should mention that he also had some pretty bad unresolved mental health issues, which played a big part in why I think it all went downhill. As other priorities take up people's time, we started hanging out less as a group on Discord, talking less in group chats, but still making time every week for D&D on Sunday. Somehow, X gets it into his head that we aren't dedicated as players and starts to abandon the sessions midway through or cancel at the last minute to sulk. The first couple of times, because we know about his mental health issues, we reached out to see if he's okay. He almost never responds, but eventually comes back and messages the group chat like nothing really happened, so we assume it's fine. The campaign continues for about another year and a half. More and more often, X starts to have private conversations with me about how other players aren't as dedicated as he would like. In summer of 2022, I moved to London and due to expenses move in with X and his girlfriend. I became kind of like his therapist, so whenever he would walk out on a game, I would go to his room and ask if he was alright and try to convince him to maybe come back or at least try to explain what was causing him so much stress. But he's a pretty closed book though, so there's not much I can say to help him. I do want to point out real quick that OP has put himself in the position of an extremely toxic relationship with X, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and think that OP might be putting himself into a parasitic relationship with X, where X becomes overly reliant to the point where he burns OP out on his ability to actually be his emotional support. Time goes on. Sometimes people are late, obviously annoying, but looking back at it, it was only by a maximum of 15 minutes, and to compensate, X would add another hour or two onto our sessions. As time went on and sessions got longer and longer, sometimes we started playing at 1 p.m. and it wouldn't finish until 9 p.m., which most of us didn't mind, but we started getting a couple of complaints from the group's partners asking why half the weekend was spent on D&D. And as people started taking on more work or other commitments, people sometimes missed out on sessions, making X more anxious. And eventually, I found out what the issue was. He said he really wanted to make something out of the Twitch channel, but if people weren't dedicated to it, it wouldn't happen. He was obsessed with Critical Role, and I think he had hoped we would gain a similar kind of popularity. And due to his business picking up more traction, he mentioned that he felt he was being taken advantage of by our group because we were neither committed nor were we paying him. When he said this, he exempted me and a couple of other really dedicated people. But again, looking back, he probably just wanted to keep me on his side. So I need to jump in here because this is something that I'm noticing already. This is a catch-22 ultimatum. He doesn't actually want them to leave. He wants to guilt trip them into coming back to the session and being more dedicated. This is not an attempt to be like, if you guys aren't dedicated, then I have no interest in DMing this. This is an attempt to guilt them into coming back. And I know this because I've dealt with significant others in my life who use this exact tactic. And when they make the wrong decision of the catch-22, suddenly now they're enemies of everyone else. Anyways, sorry, I had to point that out. We had a group discussion about what we wanted from Twitch. Most of the group said they were happy to contribute, and I asked for the password on the Instagram account so I could post and promote consistently. I never got given it in the end. But 2 of the players vocalized that they really didn't care all that much about streaming, that they were happy to come along for the ride, but they just wanted to play DnD. Oh boy. This is where things started to take a turn for the worse. It's obvious that X isn't happy with the 2 undedicated players, and it doesn't help that these 2 players are the ones who are most often late to the game. More and more, I'm in X's room trying to be encouraging. He opens up about some of his mental health issues, and I tell him he should try and find actual therapy or something that will help him. I found out later that other people had similar conversations. Fucking knew it. Encouraging him to seek help or find a way to deal with whatever it was that was causing him to feel this way about the game. It's batted down every time, and I appreciate that therapy isn't for everyone, but X had never even tried. Also, bear in mind that while X is saying these things to me, he never actually addressed it with the group or the individuals he is annoyed at. This is another thing that happens with these kind of catch-22 ultimatums, is they won't actually communicate the full terms of it or why they're upset with you and guise it as something else, and then it turns out that you made the wrong choice and now you're responsible for this mess. And if you do see these traits in yourself, which some of us very well might, just make sure that you're communicating. People would rather have you be open and honest with them than for you to lock down and aim for that messy confrontation later down the line rather than just take the time to have a shorter confrontation that clears everything up. I asked him once if he wanted me to speak to the group, and he gave a half-assed, "Oh, thank you, I would appreciate it, but you know you don't have to though." I went back to the Discord call and basically recounted what X had said to me about real commitment and about X not being paid for his time. Thankfully, another player called me out on it and reminded me that D&D wasn't school or work, but something we did for fun. We all loved the game, and it was pretty evident we were friends and we didn't have to be in this group, but we wanted to because we enjoyed each other's company. I apologized, asked X to join the call, and X didn't say a word about his actual feelings and didn't apologize for penalizing the group. I felt quite manipulated and betrayed at this, seeing as how I simply repeated his words, but the conversation seemed to be taking a brighter turn, so I didn't want to be the one to bring the mood down again. The group again encourages X to seek help because no matter what we say or how much we love on the game, if X doesn't believe it, we can't help him. After the call, he thanked me for sticking up for him, but I just felt awful about it. I had betrayed my best friends and taken the fall for something I didn't even really think. I couldn't even really call it out because X had said that I didn't have to. In the game, we were reaching what we thought was the big bad evil guy boss battle. It had been hyped up for ages, X telling us how hard this fight would be and that some of us could die. Recurring characters came back to help us fight, and we all mentioned the session before the final battle that this was the end of the campaign. How sad we were to see it end, but also how proud we were of how far we'd come. X didn't respond. Something else it's important to note here is that X had previously said that beyond this fight, he expected the game to go on for another 3 months or so, just to tie up loose ends. I should also mention that he had encouraged us to create new characters for a new campaign. In the week between the final campfire chats and the boss battle, X's girlfriend asked him how long he expected the current campaign to go on for, and he said possibly another 6 months to a year. We were all confused, but then we got to the final battle, and after we defeated the Elder Brain, our big bad evil guy, it was revealed that there was an even bigger big bad evil guy that was controlling it. This was pre-Baldur's Gate 3, just a funny coincidence. Our group was surprised, but none of us wanted to question it in case X thought we were being unappreciative again. Once the dust cleared, X decides he wants to focus on one character specifically. As the player, we'll call him F, is the only one who hasn't had any backstory exploration in the whole game. He made a character curse to never be able to talk about his past and from a very distant location, so it was never really relevant to the story. I created a new character, as my old one was busy doing her own thing. Our characters took a year-long break, but I ended up regretting it. Again, I was living with X and I didn't want him to think I was being unappreciative. So, we go to this new location, and now the big bad evil guy is dead. The story has no direction. Everything is focused on F's character. He's the only one that speaks the native language, and the rest of us are just kind of there. It takes us 6 sessions to get there, meet F's family, and then start the journey to the capital. Keep in mind, now that the games are 8 hours long, that's 48 total hours, maybe even more, of me sat at my computer doing literally nothing. I started playing video games because sometimes I didn't say a word the whole session. Basically, it got really boring. Other than F, we had no reason to be there, but we all felt bad that F hadn't got the appreciation for his character and X was still pulling his old dedication trick. I spoke to some of the other players and they agreed things had fallen off a bit, and me and another girl in the group decided that we needed a break from it. We'd been playing for 2.5 years and we just wanted something a bit different, so we told X that we'd stop playing this game and join back when the new one started. X was not happy at all. We tried to be kind about it, knowing how fragile X was about the game, but yeah, he stopped talking to me for like a week, which is a long time if you live together. The Sunday after me and the other girls stopped playing, X didn't show up and never ran a session for the group again. He didn't tell anyone that the campaign was stopping. Others waited on Discord for him to arrive, but after 3 weeks of wondering, people stopped showing up. So the game fizzled. We were still friends though, and I decided I was going to stay out of my own sanity. X did mention to me a while later that the other girl had taken advantage of him because he gave her a cool story arc and she just dropped the game out of nowhere. Majorly awkward because I knew he was like saying the same thing about me to other people, as in X was shit-talking him to other people in the group or other members of the friends. Now, we did suggest starting campaign 2 and come back to campaign 1 when we'd all had a break, but X didn't want to do that. A couple of other people mentioned DMing instead, but every time X said he would start up campaign 1 again soon, so not to bother. Never happened. In the end, summer of 2023, X and his girlfriend had a huge argument, and his girlfriend told us that he'd done some pretty questionable things bordering on abusive towards her, and asked him to leave and stay with his mom for a while. X left our DnD group chat, ignored everyone who reached out, and then blamed us for again not being dedicated enough. It was a whole thing, but too long to go into. He blamed all of his actions on his poor mental health, to which the general response was that we tried to help him as much as we could, but it's still no excuse for how he treated people. Ironically, I'm the DM of the group now, and we've started a fresh campaign. X isn't in contact with anyone from our group apart from one, weirdly enough, one of the guys who was always late. And I do feel a bit of sympathy for X, understanding the DM anxiety of wanting to make sure your players have a good time, but I try not to let it get in the way of things. We don't stream on Twitch. We play in person and schedule games when we can. It's honestly shocking to see the difference in the vibe we have now. People have openly said how much more relaxed they feel, and I don't think it's anything to do with my DMing skills. I'm still very new. But simply the fact that we aren't locked into some D&D cult. Too long didn't read real quick. DM tries to use his mental health as an excuse to manipulate players into feeling bad for not being dedicated to the game. Okay, as this person mentioned at the top, they're definitely not the asshole in this situation. I've dealt with people like this before. Hell, I've dated people like this before. And it's way too eerily similar to experiences that I've personally had for me to feel like they're just making this up for karma. Definitely see the red flags in this of someone who's talking shit about other players behind their back, someone who gives ultimatums, someone who just in general has a very negative attitude towards it and won't actually communicate with the group if something's wrong. Those are red flags, avoid them. Because sometimes people just would rather watch the group burn to the ground than actually sit down and have a fucking conversation with someone. This one's posted by Error Demon Egg. My DM won't let me wild shape into coral. Crying emoji. Dungeon Master. We had a long debate about whether or not I could wild shape into coral because coral is considered an animal, but he says it's barely not a protist. But despite this argument, he'd still let me cast plant growth and speak with plants on kelp, which actually is a protist and not a plant. Now get this. despite me not being allowed to become coral, he is willing to allow me to become a Portuguese man of war, which, as we all know, is actually a siphonophore, which means it's multiple organisms working together as one. So he's obviously not dedicated to whether or not to let me turn into an anemone. Okay. Who gave the marine biologist a character sheet? I normally don't read comments, but that one was just in my face and phenomenal. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.